The news during this era sort of runs two or three tracks, right? We have what is going on with the Trump administration in terms of like the policy disasters that we're looking at, and I would also include in that the Republican Party. And if you wanted to expand that into sort of the insanity involved around the Republican Party rallying around an obvious predator of girls in Roy Moore. We also have this other track of like societal changes where we're seeing very powerful media figures being brought down and held to account, really, I should say, for really repulsive and I think in some instances illegal behavior, sexual assault, sexual harassment. And then we also have this sort of ongoing, slow but steady drumbeat, drip, 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 if you will, of what, we can, I guess casually or more simply say the sort of the Russia intrigue, if you will. But regardless of whether this has to do with Russia as some type of massive force changing our elections or just massive corruption that also involves Russia within the administration, there's something there. And there was movement this week on a couple of fronts, one being that you wrote about, and this is Michael Flynn. Tell us what changed in Michael Flynn's disposition.
Well, I think, I honestly think that this may have been a watershed. We don't know about it specifically what happened yet, but it's pretty clear that Michael Flynn is either in discussions for a plea agreement or they have negotiated one already. And in any case, it's pretty obvious that he's cooperating, and the reason is that the reason we know this is because his lawyers alerted the lawyers in the White House that they were no longer going to be able to share information, which is an agreement that people involved in investigations apparently do until such time as one of the participants is involved with the prosecution. And for obvious reasons, they can no longer share information. So everybody took that to mean, and I think that's probably right, that Flynn is now cooperating at the very least and may very well be in negotiations for some kind of a plea agreement. And and his lawyers met with the special counsel on Monday, I believe, which sort of validated that particular assumption. What this means is, this is a very, very big deal. Flynn was a very high-level member of the Trump campaign, the Trump transition, and for the first months in the Trump White House. He traveled with President Trump, or with candidate Trump. He was by his side throughout. He was the top foreign policy and national security advisor throughout. He was basically involved in everything that the Trump campaign, transition, and administration did in the early days. If he has if they have a plea agreement, the only reason that Robert Mueller would not just file charges and give him a plea agreement is if he had something to offer. And the only thing that Flynn can offer, as far as we know, is something on someone more important than he was. And the only person who's really more important than him was the president himself. Now, whether that has to do with the obstruction of justice charges, the Russia, the Russia contacts through the campaign, the hacking, we don't know. We don't know any of the details about what Flynn might be saying, but it's a pretty good bet that Flynn is implicating President Trump and or Jared Kushner, who is also at that level that might be in trouble. Now, Flynn is in trouble on a wide range of issues, and we don't know. Yes.
It's amazing. Flynn himself seems to be a walking RICO charge. He seems to be in like three places at one time with how many sort of various very dubious activities he was up to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and there's some that are just obvious. I mean, he failed to register as a foreign agent, and he clearly was one. I mean, that's one. And Mueller charged Paul Manafort on that. So it's not like that. That one's just a gimme as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure that's part of the the crimes that they're looking to prosecute him on. But there are a lot of others. I mean, this issue, he's got involvement with Turkey. He's got involvement in the Middle East, selling nuclear reactors. He's got all of these Russia contacts. I mean, he's in big trouble. But there's something about Flynn that I think people forget about him and why he is such a pivotal figure. Michael Flynn was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Up until 2014, he was one of the top intelligence military officers in the U.S. military. He was in charge of the Defense Department's intelligence operation.
Right.
He had privy to all of the top, most tightly held secrets of the United States. This is not some guy. This isn't George Papadopoulos, some little guy who kind of came in off the street. Michael Flynn was a top spy. I mean, essentially, that's what he was. He knew everything. Now, he was fired in 2014 because he was acting crazy and his management was absolutely disastrous. And he was pushed out by people in the CIA and various other parts of the intelligence community, as well as the president. The president himself warned Trump about
right.
Flynn, and personally, and said, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but, this guy is really bad news. Trump kept him anyway, and he kept him for 2 weeks after he was warned by the Department of Justice that Flynn had been compromised. I mean, literally. So this is a guy who had a lot of information if he wanted to share, exchange, do whatever. There is a serious possibility that he is someone that this actually goes far beyond what we know about Flynn's dealings with the Turkish government or some of these business dealings that he did afterwards. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but I do know that this is one guy that when he left government, he had a lot of information in his head, and he had some kind of axe to grind. He got fired. He was angry. He wanted to make money. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody sold secrets for money and revenge. Benedict Arnold. That's a guy who did it, right? I mean, the big one in American history. So, this I think is a very, very, very important moment in this Russia investigation. And I think that if you look at what happened when this information was leaked, I guess, over the Thanksgiving weekend, Trump has gone crazy ever since then. He's lost it. I mean, the level of stress in him is showing itself. He is behaving even more erratically than normal, and I have to suspect that this is the reason that he's doing it. And of course, now, as we said earlier, the Republicans are getting ready to reward him for it. So
that's really interesting because that has been a theme this week. We got to take a quick break, but Donald Trump's unraveling has been a particular theme this week. We got to take a quick break. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. We'll be right back with Heather Parton, or you may know her as Digby.